tonight's council meeting. It has approached 7 o'clock, the commencement hour for tonight's meeting. Can I welcome all here tonight? And I'll just run for a bit of housekeeping. If you've got your mobile phones on you, can you please switch them off or put them on silent? Agendas have been circulated. You're more than happy to grab one or share with your person next to you if there's not enough to go around. You can leave whenever you like to during the course of the meeting, but when you do leave, please leave quietly. And I also understand several questions have been submitted online and none have been requested off the floor so far. No, okay, thank you. Okay, we'll commence tonight's meeting with the membership as listed. We have apologies tonight from Councillor Gaetano Greco, who is on approved leave of absence, so we'll note that. Item 3, disclosure of conflicts of interest. Any conflicts of interest from councillors?
No,
thank you, councillors. Item 4, confirmation of minutes of the previous council meeting. Move Councillor McCarthy, second Councillor Cetus. I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. Item 5, public question time. And we've had some questions submitted prior to tonight's meeting. Question here is from Serena O'Mealy from Reservoir. Question is...
Yeah, starting this week.
It started this week.
Yeah, we're going to get questions from the floor, but yeah, we've also got these that have been submitted online, which we've got detailed answers to.
Yes, so can I read my question and then you answer?
Oh, yeah, go ahead. It's the same question that you've lodged online? Thank you, okay. All right, well, we'll take it from the floor, yes, okay.
So, given that local, just 2 questions.
Thanks. Given that local law 2013, Division 7, Section 54, subsection 11, states that, quote, the name of the questioner, the question and the response must be recorded in the minutes as an official record of the questions submitted to the meeting, end quote. Why is Council only recording a summary of the public questions and their answers instead of keeping the mandated record? What steps will be taken to correct the existing and future record of questions and answers in the minutes? That's the first question.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'll respond to that now, and thank you for presenting that. A summary of the public question time response is recorded in the minutes as the formal, more detailed response is sent in writing to the resident by the officer at the time after the meeting. With the process that commences from this evening in relation to public question time, any question that is responded to in the chamber and not taken on notice will be recorded in the minutes in full as the resident will not receive a detailed response in writing from an officer.
I don't believe that meets the requirements of the Act, but I'll take that up separately. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The second question is in relation to the former school sites in Darebin. Will Darebin Council commit to finalising the purchase of the former Ruthven Primary School site and 1.8 hectares of land adjoining the Merry Creek at the former Lakeside Secondary College well before Council enters into its pre-election caretaker period?
Well, thank you very much for that question. Actually, 3 other questions have been asked along similar lines, so we'll actually combine the response for that question you've submitted and the other questions which have come from Michael Brennan from Reservoir, Jane Miller from Northcote and Paul Zamarian from Reservoir as well, and they're in line with the question you've asked. Our response is that Council is currently in negotiations with the Victorian Government in relation to the above-mentioned parcel of land. It is uncertain at this point how long the negotiations will take and if the negotiations will produce an outcome which may be considered by Council to be acceptable. Darebin Council is committed to preserving these publicly owned open space areas for the community. That's all I can provide at this stage. I do beg your pardon. There was another section of one of the questions asked in relation to leasing the land. The Department of Education and Training have advised Council staff that leasing the land would not be an option for Council, as the Department of Education are only seeking to sell the land. This advice was provided verbally by officers from the Department of Education and Training. That's all we can provide at this stage. There are ongoing negotiations at this stage. And they're the questions which were submitted, so we'll actually provide responses to those that were submitted online. Okay. And in future, members of the gallery, you're more than welcome to ask questions from the floor. We will assist prior to commencement of the meeting. Okay. So thank you for that. We'll now proceed with tonight's agenda, commencing with item 6.1, the Solar Savers Special Charge Scheme Declaration. Councillor McCarthy has moved the item with a seconder.
I'll second it with a slight amendment, which I've circulated.
Would we have the amendment on screen? Could I ask, before accepting that as the mover, if I could just ask through yourself, Mr Mayor, to our officers, including officers that are here tonight, whether any of those points that are listed there in the proposed point 7 have already been undertaken. I just would draw to Council's attention that we have undertaken to write to ministers on the issue of the solar feed-in tariff, which I've got that correspondence here, but if I could just get some expert advice about whether we've actually done any of these things yet, because I don't want to waste officers' time duplicating an action we've already undertaken.
It's a fair call, Razi.
Yeah, Ms. Hines, would you have to respond to that?
Yes, we have, as per the last council resolution on this, to the Minister for Energy and the local MPs, taking up those points. Basically, it was, so the dot point about advocating against increased charges hasn't been taken up, but the rest of them were as per the Northern Lights Greenhouse Action Stated Position, so that has been taken up. So we have written to the Minister and local MPs regarding this. We have not written to the Premier of Victoria.
I'm happy to, given that, and thank you through you, Mr Mayor, to Ms Hines, I'm happy to accept that, but I think we might need to change the words to make it reflecting that Council's already written to ministers and MPs, would now be writing to the Premier. Because I believe we've even received correspondence from some of those ministers which has not been as supportive as we'd like to see. So I'm happy to, if Councillor Lawrence would like to alter the words slightly to reflect the fact that we have engaged in some advocacy, but now would be writing to the Minister, to the Premier.
Happy to accept the said words.
I'm the mover.
Well, can someone suggest the wording? If you can stand, Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, certainly we could probably add in due to the slow take-up of solar saver program and our following our previous correspondence to relevant ministers.
Now,
That the Mayor now right.
Satisfactory.
Thank you, and I think, if I'm correct, it would be implicit that we would copy in the previous members and ministers that we've written to keep them aware of our advocacy. On that basis, I'm happy to accept that, assuming that everything that we've got there is consistent with our position, which I believe it is. So I'm happy to receive that as an additional point.
You can speak to it now.
I'll speak to it now. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, in general, and I don't wish to focus on the point 7. I'll let Councillor Lawrence do that. I've already spoken about those matters in the chamber previously. What we actually have here is our second iteration of solar savers, and we're actually moving to what might be considered the operational part of the program, where we have invested money in last year's council budget to undertake a second round of solar savers, expanding the solar savers program from simply about pensioners to also looking at options for renters and a range of other organisations, including community organisations and kindergartens as well, and councillors can see listed in there the eligible groups that we've approached. The uptake hasn't been as large as it was in the first iteration, and there are some very important reasons for that, which Councillor Lawrence's point 7 makes reference to, and probably the report goes into a lot more detail, and we have spoken about this in the chamber previously, which is that at the moment the state government has removed what is probably the single most important factor in supporting pensioners to say yes to this program, which is having a reasonable feed-in tariff that means that the energy that is produced on the roofs of our residents is able to be sold back to electricity providers at a good price. And it is now at a woeful, I think it's around 6 cents per kilowatt hour, which is a fraction of the 30 or 36 cents that some pensioners are currently paying for that same energy, which is bought through the electricity companies. With this second iteration, of course, we do have a smaller number of people that have enrolled in it, but we still do have an immense amount of interest in this program and across a range of sectors as well. It's all there for councillors to see. Councillors have read it, and of course, with any special charge scheme, we I think this is a unique program. As Council would be aware, this is the first rates-based solar program in the country. It's become a model for other councils to look at, but we need to see the market conditions supported by the state government to actually support that uptake from more pensioners who will benefit immensely from this. And not only pensioners, of course, but also renters and other residents and even traders potentially in the future as well. The total cost of the works that we're investing in here, and this is through the facility of the rates-based mechanism, is close to $400,000. And as part of this process, we declare a special charge, which those ratepayers have opted to pay as part of the payback for the program. We know how valuable this is to those ratepayers and to those householders in terms of immediately seeing benefit to reducing their own power bills and having a positive environmental impact. So, as councillors will be aware, as is outlined in the report, the uptake has not been as high as it has been in previous years. We hope that the state government will get its act together and, as per the Essential Services Commission's own recommendations and their report, look at a feed-in tariff that is fair, reasonable and actually provides the type of incentive to allow more pensioners to get on board with solar savers. I just want to thank, through you, Mr Mayor, to our officers for the work that they do, and also to the support we get from NAGA and the Darebin Environmental Reference Group as well.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Lawrence, the seconder, do you wish to speak?
Yes, Mr Mayor. Just as Councillor McCarthy's pointed out, the Solar Saver program is a very successful program, and people are looking at duplicating it around the sector, because basically it uses a unique relationship that exists between pensioner landowners and the rates to actually get over the capital expense of installing solar. And this isn't a boutique issue. This is an issue that should concern everyone, moving to renewables and also giving practical examples to people about how you can move to renewable energy. I've put in the dot points amendment because I did notice in the previous motion we just said that we would advocate NAGA's position to the state government. And I get concerned sometimes we delve into jargon in sustainable energy, and we need to actually break it down so people understand what's holding back the second round. This last round of Solar Saver is a 5 cent tariff feed-in rate is far too low, and what people who have NAGA who've looked at it said it should be closer to 11 or 14 cents. So that's what's holding up things. But also, in addition to that, a range of measures are being introduced by the electricity industry that actually discriminate against our pensioners who have installed solar scheme. So they're not seeing the full benefits flow through. So we need these things addressed. They are being addressed in other countries, and they should be a top priority here in Victoria. And I do note that letters and correspondence gone to ministers, and why this is addressed to the Premier is because we need to elevate this issue.
Councillor Cedas.
Mr Mayor, thanks. I'm speaking in favour of the amended motion as it's presented here tonight, and it was alluded to during the adoption of the budget as well, particularly in relation to the prospect of raising additional borrowings to augment the size of this year's Solar Savers program, which I spoke against. And I think the report makes it pretty clear what we're up against, and Councillor Lawrence's amendment gets to the nub of the point. We've got a systemic problem. So beyond advocacy, I did indicate then that what we might well be looking for, particularly in light of the Premier's announcement, which was perhaps drowned out during the federal election campaign about the drive towards carbon neutrality for Victoria. Now, major projects were indicated, and so the question then is begged, what does constitute major and what constitutes under that threshold? It may well be that beyond Darebin we actually start to collaborate with other councils in order to augment the size of the program. I'm still very much effusive about what we're doing here, and we don't need these sort of, I suppose, disincentives being put in there in order to flag a negative signal out there to the market, where otherwise vulnerable people would have taken it up, as we saw with gusto in Solar Savers Mark 1. So in that respect, you look at what we've got here, is there a potential? It's going to be a challenge for the new council in order to move in that direction. But I would ask, in that circumstance, a report to actually talk to the other councils to see if they're willing to join in an alliance. It's interesting that, and I'll leave it on this point, that Yarra, Moreland have been very, very quiet, considering the fact that hitherto till now they've been boasting they've been ahead of us, where in fact we have been ahead of the game.
Thank you, Councillor Cetus, for that comment. If there's no further debate, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That item is carried. Thank you, councillors. Next item we're looking at is 6.2, Solar Saver Progress Report and Second Special Charge Scheme.
Happy to move.
Move, Councillor McCarthy. Seconded. Councillor Cetus. Councillor McCarthy.
Once again, just to get through all the legal instrumentation here, Mr Mayor, this is the second part of this process, which is our process of giving notice to declare... sorry, I've just moved to the motion there. This is actually giving notice of our intention to declare the special charge in accordance with the Local Government Act. And I just wanted to draw councillors' particular attention to the components in this second report, which relates to some of the other legal instruments that are required in this process, which is actually to give some information about who's actually signed up to the program this time, which I think is important, and it makes a distinction between the previous iteration of Solar Savers, which was limited to pensioner households, and we've expanded the criteria to a much broader range of organisations. And I think what we will learn, regardless of what happens with the feed-in tariff, what we will learn in terms of the difference this program makes for those organisations and those types of households will be of immense value in terms of our further advocacy. So I don't hold a lot of hope in the current government's intentions, because they have not made the declarations that we seek. We'll wait and see what comes of that. The great information is that we are piloting, once again, some really interesting work. At the moment, we have commitments from 56 households, one social housing cooperative that includes 32 residential homes. That's the Northcote Thornbury Housing Cooperative, which has already done immense work in terms of energy efficiency and are now moving to not only saving energy, but now producing energy. And of course, 3 neighbourhood houses. So a total of 91 properties in this iteration of the scheme, and I think a range of different types of providers. And for the first time, of course, we've got renters or through our Cooperative Housing Association, and of course also neighbourhood houses, community organisations. So this is great to see. We must continue the advocacy, and I literally have the pile of letters here from MPs of all persuasions, some of whom have voiced support for our position, but echo our concern about the lack of a fair and equitable feed-in tariff that supports the uptake of these sorts of programs. As councillors would see as well in the report, there is some clear indications as to how we have come to calculate what is prescribed as the benefit which is achieved by these residents and organisations who choose to pay this special rate. So it is an innovative program. It is not, at the moment, supported by the government's legislative and regulatory regime on feed-in tariffs, but we hope with the right advocacy that will change.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Cetus.
Very briefly, Mr Mayor, because in essence the second report pretty much dovetails with the first, but I'd like to draw councillors' attention to the schedule, Schedule 2, and particularly in relation to Appendix B. And councillors might recall, when the first iteration of Solar Savers was launched, it was quite interesting. We had, beyond what I might call loosely, and without sort of agitating Councillor McCarthy on this, a greenwash in relation to the take-up being primarily to the south of the city. And in fact, what we saw was that the majority of the take-up in the first phase was in Reservoir, was in the northern parts of our city. Now that lends itself to the argument in terms of the systemic problems that the north has faced over generations, I would argue, in terms of high numbers of unemployment, living below the poverty line, on welfare and the rest. But it pleases me greatly to look at the next tranche, and you'll notice that the predominant spread seems to be spreading to the south. Now, even though the numbers are relatively modest relative to phase 1, it does indicate how our program is actually spreading throughout the municipality and really inspiring people to exercise their options where they can to join in. And that's notwithstanding the changes in the market signals which the government has set in place. And I think it's very unfortunate. As I said, Mr Mayor, the report number 1 does dovetail with number 2, and it is indicative that we would go back out to the market, that we get an equal spread back up further north into the city in order to ensure that we've got an equal spread of interest, because I think that platform is going to be of key consideration for us in terms of broadening the scope and advocating not just to the government but through the ESC, I would argue, in the context of a rate capping environment.
Thank you, Councillor Sudis. If there's no other speakers, I'll put that item to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. We're going to go to item 6.3, surplus state government land, 45 Mary Parade, Northcote.
Mr Mayor, I'll move an alternative motion to that which is listed. It would simply be that Council, 1, advise VicTrack of Council's intent to acquire the land, subject to agreement of an appropriate price.
Second.
And point 2, enable Council and community members to make representations to relevant MPs and defer the matter until such representations are completed.
Second, Mr Mayor.
Can we get that on the screen?
It has words aren't there, so.
Have they been seconded? Is it an open...
It's easier in terms of the words to defer the matter.
let's defer the matter.
Just defer the matter to the subsequent meeting. Yep, that's fine. I think the intent's clear.
Okay, we've got
I'll just.
And the reason for deferral?
Just reason for deferral. Through engagement with local residents who share Council's view that this land is best placed to be in Council's hands. Council has made representations to VicTrack, which is the current property owner of the land, but of course Council and the Merri Creek Management Committee do the maintenance work for this land. We are the custodians of this land. We have been for decades, and yet, as councillors would see in the report, VicTrack is essentially given an indication, at least through our officers, of a willingness to see council purchase that land. The price on the table, as councillors would read, is $500,000, $500,000, which is a significant amount of money. It is not the full market value, but it is still a significant amount of money. And the communication from residents who I've engaged with, and I think Councillor Cedis has engaged with in the past, and Councillor Walsh potentially as well as ward councillors, is that they want to see this land gifted to council. Now, I think we accept that there is potentially some price to pay, but there is also some upgrade to the facility to that land and remediation works to the creek corridor. So there is strong support from MPs in relation to the future of this land being in council hands. It's the specific dollar amount that's important, and also the agreement around which council can provide that remediation work, and which would be, of course, at council's expense. So it's not $500,000 and that's it. It's $500,000 and some investment, and we need to make sure that when residents are saying to us they actually want us to secure the land, but they want us to not be just throwing money away, that we've got to give the local MPs another chance to do the right thing by council.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McCarthy.
Just, Mr Mayor, I'd like to ask a question before I vote on the deferral.
What's the question, Councillor Lawrence?
Just in relation to page 26 in the report, the second paragraph on page 26, it talks about the revised valuation being approximately 7.25% of the market value of the land at residential development. I was just trying to understand what percentage discount is this being offered at? 50, 60, 80? What is it?
92.75, isn't it?
Yeah, correct. 92.75%.
Sorry, 92.75 discount on 6,000 square metres of land.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Councillor. Councillor Cedis, second, you wish to speak?
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I actually might touch upon Councillor Lawrence's question. And be polite to Councillor McCarthy, because Councillor McCarthy has been very polite. I don't need to hold my punches on this. Look, this land cannot be touched. I mean, the suggestion that it's got any development potential is fanciful. So, I think I see Councillor Lawrence smiling, and I think he knows that we've been fed up.
We're speaking for a deferment, though.
Yeah,
we can leave the argument to next time, because I know where this is going.
The deferment is in line with Councillor McCarthy's intent that Council can give to the land.
We're speaking for deferment, though.
Yes, Mr Mayor, and I've got very limited time, so I want to put a couple of issues on the table. What does it mean when the land in question is still designated as a freeway by Vic Roads? Does it extinguish itself if, in the circumstances, Council wishes to seriously entertain the purchase? So, this idea that somehow this land equals X amount in its square meterage and can be developed is pie in the sky stuff. All these questions need to come back to us in the form of a report. to form a view in terms of giving us some kind of guidance. My instinctive reaction is to say no. I would note, in closing, Mr Mayor, the preferential treatment given with respect to the Wingrove parcel as distinct from this parcel, and in this circumstance, the victory claimed in terms of shifting one public asset to another public entity. And I'll leave it there, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. I'm glad you have Councillor Cetus. If there's no further comment or debate, we're voting for a deferment of this item. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Members of the gallery, we have made the decision on this matter. It's going to come back to Council for consideration in the future. Next item we're looking at is 6.4, surplus state government land at 48 Rona Street in Reservoir. We have a recommendation there. Councillor Lee.
Yes, I move with a slight additional point, and the point has been circulated to officers and also to councillors.
Yep.
So hopefully we'll have that on. So just the extra dot point.
Point 5 there, which was circulated previously, yes?
Yes.
Happy to second.
Second,
Thank
Councillor
you.
Williams. Councillor
Thank you, Councillor
Lee.
Williams. I'll speak very briefly to this matter because others might want to also have a say on this issue. This land has been declared surplus to use by Melbourne Water. It is a Melbourne Water Reserve. It used to be part of the water mains that runs along that particular corridor from the reservoir area down to the south-west direction towards West Preston. There is a small parcel of land at 48 Rona Street. And we have been offered as the first right of refusal under the state government land disposal policy. However, as I was reading through the report, what struck me was that the land in question has been valued at a residential zoning rate, which significantly increased the value of the land to the order of $1.25 million for 1,268 square metres of land. Compare that to the 6,000 square metres of land for $500,000 down Mary Creek, just for a previous item. What also struck me is that this is an area that requires significant community open space, as per our council open space policy, where we do want to give residents within 500 metres of their residential property access to open space for their recreation and leisure activities. So this particular parcel of land at 48 Rona Street fits in that bill perfectly. It does provide those residents living in the surrounding areas with open space, and council does have a plan, should we proceed down this path, to develop a playground and open space recreation area there. What I'm seeking to do on the fifth point is that because we are using it for public use, and because it is currently public use, why should then we be required to purchase that land at residential rate? Why don't we call it for what it is, keep it public, make sure it remains public, and make sure that land is accessible to the public for generations to come? We will enter into negotiation with Melbourne Water in good faith, in that we do want to release that land in long term. However, the land in its current state and its current zoning for a residential price range is, to put it politely, tell them their dreaming range. So I think it's appropriate for council to write to the relevant ministers and our local MPs to have that land remain public use so that we can revisit the issue at a later stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Second, Councillor William.
I'll just very briefly that with our growing population and our increasing of density in the area, it'd be really vital that we start looking and protecting our open spaces. So this would be great if we can have this as an open space area, as my previous fellow councillors already mentioned.
Thank you, Councillor William. You want to speak, Councillor Villela?
Yeah, just very quickly, thank you, Mr Mayor. I just speak obviously in favour. I think there's a bit of a theme happening here with with the Ruthven site, and I suspect it's going to be happening more and more, where the state government sees the selling off of public land, whether it's Melbourne Water or whichever statutory authority, it's all public land, to make money. And as a money-making opportunity. And I think we really need to be vigilant and consistent in this space, that it's public land and we have got increasing density. So on the one hand, you've got the State Planning Authority saying, we need to make more room for increased population, increased development and accommodate, which means that we're going to have more people in a smaller space. But what becomes even more precious commodity is the public open space. As Julie individually, as Councillor Williams said, and I think we really do need to be consistent in our message to the various authorities in the state government, is that they need to come to the party with this. On the one hand, we've got rate capping, where we have to make sure that we cut back on expenditures in order to balance the books, and that's going to be really tough in future councils. And then on the other hand, we have this particular challenge where we need to meet for the well-being of the community, which is part of our responsibility and prescribed in the Act. That's what our role is as councillors, well-being, and well-being, underpinning well-being, is access to open space for our residents. So we really need to be vigilant. I welcome that, and we need to keep the pressure on the state government to make sure that the negotiations with council are in good faith. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. If there's no further debate or comment, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That item is carried. Thank you, councillors. Let's note that as a unanimous vote. Thank you. Next item is 6.5, the Planning Committee Charter. Happy to move. Move, Councillor Walsh. Have a seconder.
I'm happy to second with a amendment.
And you've been this, Councillor
I've got an amendment there somewhere.
That's not accepted, and also a point of order. I believe Councillor Lawrence also has a notice of motion to the effect of point 2. Okay. My preference would be that
you've not accepted it. You've not accepted it. We might say.
My preference would be that they are dealt with.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so is there a second of the Councillor Lawrence? No? If there's not, that's lapsed. So we have a mover for the current recommendation, or a seconder for that? Second of Councillor Cedas, thank you. Councillor Walsh, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Look, Mr. Mayor, this is important to amend the planning charter, because what we're seeing, because of course at the moment we are seeing problems where the data group is putting in mass spam objections, and it's causing, and we know it's causing a great amount of drain to resources and to time of the council officers. It's amending this charter is a fair charter. It's basically saying if you were 4 or 5 kilometres away, in many situations up to 10 or 15 kilometres away, you should not be able to object to a planning application in Darebin. We also the Planning Environment Act also, as you know, Mr. Mayor, requires council and to make a decision within 60 days because of what data are doing and what is happening time and time again. We are falling short, and we are not able to make the decision within the 60 days. This is bad, which means it's bad for investment, and it's also in the city. The other point that I'll make is what this is about. It's about giving the residents, I guess the best. Probably the most fair treatment, because if you, Mr. Mayor, just say, because what we're saying is residents have a right to be heard, but we want the residents who are heard on planning applications to be the residents who are closest to the town.
20 seconds.
What I'll also say, picture a situation where you've got a mother and a small mother and child who wants to object to a planning application next door of them, who should be able to, but a data group or another group has lodged spam applications, and you know, where you get people, just let me finish, who are...
I am letting you finish because you've gone over time.
Can I just... Who are...
You can close the debate if there's any more discussion.
Who are, you know,
that's closed. That's closed. Councillor Walsh. Councillor Curtis, a seconder. Your turn, 2 minutes.
Mr Mayor, look, this has been a long festering sore for a number of years, and I got to say, long before time that we've actually seen a recommendation like this. The reality is that the process has been abused. We've got people as far away as the city of Burundara making complaints. It's making a complete mockery of a resident making an objection to a planning application which they believe to be inappropriate. And I think 200 metres is actually quite generous. I mean, you want to draw a square kilometre radius around a subject property, I think 200 metres is way too big. We're talking about immediate impact in terms of amenity to those who live in that street. Not Uncle Tom Cobley and all from one end of the city to the other who have no relationship to the subject site, nor the amenity in question. And we're seeing this sort of pattern form of objections from one organisation, which Councillor Walsh mentioned, but it could be from any organisation. Let's face it, the fact of the matter is it's disruptive, it is juvenile. That's what it is, because it achieves nothing. Yes, it blows out the turnaround time in terms of the statutory requirements for us to turn these applications for consideration. But the fact of the matter is we have an opportunity to remedy the situation here this evening. And I think this sort of innovation is long before time. I think if those groups wish to object to everything that is proposed on this council, you know what, in October the ballot box is there, have the guts and run.
Thank you, Councillor Citizen. For the benefit of the councillors, we've had a circulation of the planning charter given to us before the meeting with dot points with relevant items in the charter itself, so people have a look at those. Councillor
Just a question, Mr Chair. Just regarding this recommendation, because the recommendation itself doesn't spell out entirely the situation, I'm taking from this that the planning charter would be amended so 5 objections close to these 3-unit, 4-unit developments would trigger it to go 5 or more to go to the planning committee. But I just want to seek clarification. People could still lodge objections who were 200 metres away. It just wouldn't trigger a planning committee consideration.
Correct.
Yep, that's been made pretty clear to us by officers in various briefings.
Because I'll just, I suppose, make the comment, it's not entirely clear from that sentence, because of the way it's constructed.
Any other? Councillor Lee?
Look, I feel compelled to speak against this new revised charter, Mr Mayor, and I do so on several grounds. I think what we've got at the moment actually works, and when something is not broken, let's not try and fix something, because we understand the issue here of people having spam objections. However, if a planning application is lodged and I'm affected by as an immediate vicinity owner, you bet your bottom dollar I'll walk up and down my street to get the 5 signatures required within 200 metre radius. So this 200 metre radius is meaningless if an objector seriously wants to object to a resident developing next to a parcel of land. So that fails, number 1. Number 2, what we hear is about giving equal weight to objectors and applicants. What this does artificially constrains the rights of objectors at the expense, perhaps, of some other parties. Put it another way, if the committee charter is revised such that only applicants can have only 5 live applications to this planning committee, that would cause an uproar, wouldn't it? If a developer only can launch up to 5 applications per year, that will cause an uproar. It doesn't happen, does it? So let's play fair. Let's make sure we give equal franchise to all parties involved and not knee-jerk to some sort of reactionary process that's happening in place. And as Councillor Seater said, things will happen in October, come to council elections, and things may well change. And should the new council see fit to revise this planning charter, then let the new council decide.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Williams.
I'm a little, I don't know which way I'm going, but I do have concerns regarding this matter in reference
For
to...
or against? Or ask a question?
I want to ask the question
Ask the
because
question.
I understand it from a residential point of view, but if it was a larger block or a larger development that was occurring and it was going to affect me and my amenity, whether I use it as a...
It's in there, in the charter.
Okay.
Does that answer your question? People can read the charter, the actual dot points which have been provided in there as conditions, I understand. Any other speakers? Councillor McCarthy.
Look, I'll speak against it for a slightly different reason to Councillor Lee, but I follow the argument that he's made. I appreciate the difficult position that that officers find themselves in when it comes to planning applications, and I think that there is an earnest attempt to deal with the workload, and the workload is significant. I believe in the City of Darebin at the moment are looking at between 1,000 and 1,500 planning applications per annum.
1,500.
1,500. The volume is significant, and the proportion is largely in favour of multiple unit dwellings rather than single dwellings, and this brings with it a whole range of complexity and challenges. And I have heard in the planning committee from residents and applicants that everyone wants to have certainty. What I see in the pattern of what are identical objections to a range of developments, and often, and I would be the first one to say, often poorly targeted points of objection to the actual applications because they don't relate to the application themselves, is actually a symptom of a problem, which is about how we have the community involved in a conversation about good planning. And that's what's missing in this conversation. I don't think that the amendments as proposed to the Planning Charter will solve that. That is only solved through actually a more comprehensive review of how we do planning at the community engagement level, and the requirements that we must place on applicants and developers to actually positively engage with their neighbours in the lead up to an application. That doesn't happen. It's not legislated or required under Res Code, and certainly not under the Planning and Environment Act. But we can do some things in this chamber, and I've proposed them in the past, and they would go some step towards creating a more conciliatory model of dealing with planning applications. So I can't support this because I actually don't think it's going to solve what people might think is the problem, and I think we're actually trying to deal with the wrong problem. The problem is actually one of a feeling of being under siege, and it's not about the number of applications.
Councillor Villala.
Yeah, I'm also going to speak against it, Mr. Mayor. I think this was this proposal, this idea was put forward when the applications from the advocacy group was coming. And I felt really uncomfortable with it. I think it's been reactive rather than actually get into the source of the frustrations that there are a lot of people out there that are concerned with the overdevelopment across the state. I think, first of all, we can't deny people the right to do this. They have got the right to put in, whether it's data or whether it's 3 individuals or whether I live in outside of a 200-metre radius, they've got the right to do it, and I don't think we should be denying them that right through amending the Charter. Secondly, I think I agree with Councillor McCarthy that there are other options that we haven't, that we as a council haven't explored. I think there are problems with the planning, the statewide planning schemes and limitations. I think groups like Data should actually be focusing on the state government and the Minister for Planning and trying to get some changes around, increased regulations from them, because we've got really limited power in many respects. So I think there needs to be more dialogue with groups, with group like Data. I think there needs to be more community engagement. When we look at planning matters, I don't think this is the solution. I think this is a really simplistic knee-jerk reaction, and I agree with Councillor McCarthy. The problems, the frustrations are not going to go away, and I don't think it's a smart move to progress in this space. I think it's just going to get worse.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Any other speakers? Councillor Williams, you asked a question before.
Yeah,
you
and
can speak.
I will be voting against this because
You'll speak against it then, won't you?
I will be speaking against this firstly because I believe that Darebin Council has one of the lower amount of objections that can be put in place in regards to application as opposed to other municipalities. And if we increase that, I think that, as my previous councillor has already mentioned, that people will go out further to door knock to ensure that they get a higher amount of objections to ensure that it does come to council. I also don't like the footnote where it says that any larger developments of $10 million or 8 stories or above. I think that's out of whack for me, because if, as I was saying before, that if I was living or working in an area or travelling in an area and it was going to affect my amenity of doing my daily chores or tasks, I would be impacted, and I would like to know that I could be object to something like that. However, this would sort of limits that to obviously only to developments over 10 million or 8 stories.
Councillor Lawrence.
Hello. I'd like to speak in favour of the motion. How long have I got?
2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay. I think people are being a little bit dishonest because of their own political associations, but this has been a manipulation of data. I've been a community activist for a long time. When we object to a building, we go and door knock the people next to it, not in Bowen and Kew, who are your Facebook friends. The same for...
Mr Mayor,
Councillors, thank you. Yeah, can you speak to the item?
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. I understand.
Can we just get clarification? Because I heard the words dishonest and other
words. I think we'll change the word to maybe inappropriate.
Councillor Lawrence followed the code of conduct and rules of debate.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Continue, please.
I find it a dishonest form of activism where you use people remotely to object to small objection of developments. And I will say that again. When we did work to object to something that was going to impact on many people, the Bundoora Towers, we worked at the beginning with all the residents there and the residents who use that site. So there is a relevance to that. Now, the state government has changed the planning scheme at VCAT to take consideration of major objections and the number of objections to large developments. What we've seen with the data scheme is misguided in that they're clogging up our planning department with small applications that should be dealt with under delegation. They have the same 14 names and they have the same, we object to 1 and 2 bedrooms. By the way, our housing strategy says we need 1 bedrooms and we need 3 bedrooms. So there shouldn't be a war on 1 and 2 bedrooms. So we're actually not using they're not following and attacking those buildings that are out of scale. They are actually attacking regular schemes. And I would note other cities have 16 as the level of objections and 10. So we have a very easy objection. Very easy to get 5 people.
Thank you. Councillor Walsh? Close the debate.
Yes. Thank you. Look, Councillor Lee said the system isn't broken. Look, I think there's indications to say that it is because it is clearly being abused at the moment. There's to my mind, and you're also stopping mum and dad investors who just want to put an extension onto their own home. But also think about a situation where someone who is close by is complaining about about a development which is going to affect them. Who they might live 2 or 3 stories, 2 or 3 houses away. Now, everyone here would agree that that person has a right, has an absolute right to be heard by their council. However, we could be in a situation where their legitimate voices and legitimate concerns are drowned out by and they could potentially have less time to be heard at planning committee, and therefore are drowned out by objectors who live miles away. So you could end up in a situation where it actually hurts, and I'm concerned because you'll actually, because what's happening here is the potential to hurt real and legitimate objectives.
10 seconds. Thank you, Councillor. Before I put that to a vote, I'd like to make some comments too in relation to this matter. Look, the charter isn't broken to start with. We're only reviewing it and amending it to ensure that everyone gets fair treatment, which is what the purpose of the charter is to do. We are one of the most generous councils when it comes to assessing applications. When it goes to the planning committee in relation to 5 objections, we've tried to amend that to higher objections, 10, 15. We haven't done that. We've left it at 5 to ensure that the planning committee makes determinations on behalf of our community. Other councils instruct that under delegation to officers. Some have 10, 15, 20 objections. We have 5. So we actually receive a fair workload from our planners to assess applications which have objected to by residents. Can I also say, if you look at the figures on page 44 in relation to applications considered by the planning committee in 2013, 14, 15, you've seen a consistent figure there of 83, 81, 82. 2016, we're targeting 200 applications. Quite a substantial increase, and we understand why. We know why, for various reasons, and we won't go into detail. We will know why, what those reasons are. The cost on council has been dramatic. It's caused our planning department's fees to go up. It's resulted in numerous more applications going to VCAT, where it costs us to defend or argue against applications. But more importantly, it's actually degraded us in our planning assessments in relation to local government authorities when it comes to assessing how we deal with applications. So it's disappointing that some councillors have thought of the fact that, despite many attempts, many discussions in relation to this matter, that they feel as if it doesn't need to change. It actually does. To serve the interests of the whole community, not just a select few who think that they can determine and tell us how we can do it. Well, come October, they can determine that in the ballot box, and I hope they do. I'll now put that to a vote. All those in favour of the recommendation? Those against? It's a tied vote. The vote is 4-4. I will therefore use my casting vote to support the recommendation and amend the charter. Councillor Walsh wants a division. Can I ask all those to stand who support the charter? Councillor Cetus, Fontana, Lawrence and Walsh. Those against? Valella, Lee, Williams and McCarthy. Thank you. That concludes that item. Next item is 6.5, the establishment of Batman Park Naming Committee.
Happy to move, Mr Mayor.
6.6, I beg your pardon. Move Councillor McCarthy, second Councillor Williams. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Williams. Along with other councillors and yourself, Mr Mayor, we had a terrific event on Saturday, which was the first of 4 consultation sessions to consider the renaming of Batman Park. This has been a long-running issue and point of discussion in the City of Darebin. It doesn't just go back to the motion which I had the pleasure of moving in 2013 following some unfortunate expression of support for the Batman Treaty, which was a bit misguided by the local member at the time. But I think what it enabled was the facilitation of a discussion about how we do both reconciliation and recognition here in the City of Darebin, and also do what we can in the things that we have power over to provide a better way forward in terms of how we recognise the Wurundjeri connection to land and country, and the ownership by the land of people, rather than just the ownership of land, which we often speak about in this chamber. And for councillors and community members that were present at the first consultation session, or that will attend the subsequent 3, it is a really powerful conversation and quite an emotional conversation to be part of. And I wouldn't say that I've had many experiences in a council consultation process, which of course was led by the Wurundjeri elders, to experience such raw connection to how people feel about the issues that we raised, which are to do with the impact of European settlements and invasion, and in this case the first contact between the Port Phillip Association led by Batman and the Wurundjeri people. This proposal here essentially takes us to the procedural component of what's going to be taking place over coming months, which is the consideration of an appropriate name or names for Batman Park to replace the name Batman. and the proposal up to date has been to look at a Wurundjeri name, and there were three names that were proposed on Saturday, and of course the Wurundjeri elders have been very open in saying they are also open to consideration of other names as well, and have been incredible in their generosity of their own feelings and thoughts about what will make an appropriate replacement name for the park. And of course, for some members of the community, the first question is, and they need to understand this, why would we consider changing the name? And that's part of the process of consultation and the conversations that are taking place. But to the report proposes a structure for a Batman Park renaming committee. This is to do some detailed work, not just by councillors and council officers, but also by representatives of key organisations, most notably the Wurundjeri Council, but also someone from a historical society, a representative from the Aboriginal Advisory Committee, and there's a couple of other representatives in there as well. I think this is a terrific way forward, and I believe it's got strong support from the Wurundjeri Council to tick the procedural box. I just want to thank our officers on their incredible work on Saturday, Mr Mayor, it was quite amazing the day they put together. Thank you.
Before the seconder speak, I just need to note on page 50 where the recommendation point 2, where we've actually struck out the relevant ward councillors and included the term any interested councillors. So I think that's appropriate.
That was my question.
Yeah,
that's a proposal from officers or a proposal from a councillor?
From Councillor Lynch, which was circulated today.
I have no objection as the member.
Yeah, it makes sense. That's where it says the relevant ward council. I think that needs to be replaced and considered by everyone, any interested councillor.
It was a suggested amendment.
Yeah, suggested. So that's been included now. Okay. Councillor Williams, seconder.
Look, I think it's really important that our Wurundjeri people have a voice. In so many years they haven't had a voice, including right back at the days where Batman came and actually did the treaty and swapped the land with a few blankets and a few other equipment that was brought on a boat. I think it's important that having here in Darebin that Indigenous people, we have one of the highest populations here in Darebin, and it's great that we have been going forward and speaking to them, see what other alternatives about renaming Batman to what possibly would be more appropriate for the future. And I think I'd like to thank our officers and fellow councillors that have been part of this process, and I look forward to hearing what names that leave the council.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any further speaker? If not, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you, councillors.
Leave that noted unanimously.
Let's have that noted as unanimous vote. Thank you. 6.7, the Arts Strategy for 2014-20, two-year progress report. Moved by Councillor McCarthy. Secondly, Councillor Bilala. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to acknowledge that we have our manager of the arts area with us tonight in the gallery as well, if councillors have any questions in relation to this. There's an enormous amount of work that our arts unit does, and it's part of a larger ecosystem of cultural activity, as councillors would see. We don't drive the activity here from within the City of Darebin, but we are a key partner to a lot of activity that takes place. And it's activity which, as you would see in the attachments to the report, has an enormous social, cultural and economic impact on the city, and I think one that's sometimes understated. But just in terms of the full outcomes of both our own art programs and the work that happens around us in the City of Darebin, the arts in fact comprises about 5% of employment in the City of Darebin, which is a significant amount. It accounts for millions of dollars of investment in the city, and of course in terms of essentially our gross product into the broader economy, it is a significant component. And it will continue to grow, and that's why having a good look at what we've done and having a look at how we at that council level can facilitate strong ambassador type partnership approaches with other organisations and partnerships with people that sit around the table with us as the eyes and ears of what's happening on the ground is really important. So having the right people at the table in our processes within the City of Darebin to make sure that our officers and our councillors are hearing what is happening, what are new practices and ways of working, and where are the opportunities for us as a council to support, to engage, and in some cases to mobilise activity. We have some great cultural institutions and arts institutions in the City of Darebin, and the ones that often get commented about are of course the live music scene and the galleries, but there is art practice taking place in people's garages, in shop fronts, in industrial sheds, a whole range of places, and if we don't have the people around the table that understand where that's taking place and where it's going to, then we're missing the wisdom that's available to us. And we have had, and I should point this out, we have had some people that have been pioneering festivals and activities on our Arts Ambassadors Committee, and it's been great to hear directly from them about their own insights about the challenges that they've faced and what we can do better as a council across the whole organisation to make it easier for them to create those opportunities. So it's all pretty clear there for councillors. I would recognise the enormous work that our Arts Department does on a very small budget, and that if we didn't have that, it would be a very, very quiet place, and I think nowhere nearly as vibrant as we know it to be. This goes back a long way, this work, and let's hope that with the good framework in place, a good committee on board, that we can continue to propagate good work.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Villala.
Oh, look, just very quickly, Councillor McCarthy summed up the main tenets of the document. It's a really impressive art strategy, Mr. Mayor. The depth and breadth is quite breathtaking, and I commend the leadership in this space, and also the other officers. There has been some notable success stories that we're all aware of. The Darebin Community Kite Festival that was moved to Reservoir and there was a commitment to keep it there, or a theory, if we keep it there in Reservoir for 3 or 4 years, it will build a presence and an identity, and it certainly has achieved that. It's gone from strength to strength, and I'm also proud of there's also the Mayoral Writing Award, which was an idea that I had, and that's gone from strength to strength. So there's just so much happening in this space, and I think, and I also think that there's been significant increase in this space in the northern part of the municipality, Reservoir. There's more happening there, because that was an area that was lagging behind. But that inequity, I think, is being addressed progressively over the years. So I'm happy to commend the work and congratulate the officers for their work in this space. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Walsh.
I'm going to speak on this. I'd like to speak in favour.
Please do.
I'm speaking in favour, and as a former member, with Councillor McCarthy and Councillor Villala, who are also members of the Arts Council reps on the Arts Ambassadors program. The arts scene in Darebin is obviously something which is fantastic, and I think probably one of the city's real assets. I mean, a few weeks ago we at council we were discussing the council's Darebin's tourism strategy, and one can't help thinking that a lot of these arts venues should be venues of I guess tourism into Darebin as well, and obviously things like Northgate Town Hall, Darebin Arts and Entertainment Centre, and we've also got fantastic events like the Darebin Music Feast. I'm also went to I'm pretty sure this is true. Councillor McCarthy
10 seconds.
Did tell me once that Darebin has the largest amount of comedians compared to any other council within Australia, if that's correct.
Councillor Williams.
I just want to say a big thank you to all our staff, because I think they do a wonderful job, and I really enjoy being and living here in Darebin. I've attended to many events, attraction sites and exhibitions, both held at places like going to Loudmouth, True North, Darabin Music Festival, the Hone Food and Wine Festival, Inscribe, Creative Speakeasy, the Darabin Arts Centre that hold a lot of wonderful events there, the Northcote Town Hall and the Bundoora Homestead. Just in this week alone, I've attended Picasso and his dog down at the Darabin Arts Centre, which was a wonderful puppet show, probably the best puppet show I've ever seen. And also a new mural just went up along Plenty Road and Tyler Street. So that's just two different items in just a matter of 7 days, which I just want to say a big thank you. And I love living here in Darabin.
We all do. Thank you, Councillor. If there's no further comment or debate, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That item is carried. Thank you, councillors. That concludes our reports. We now go to item 7. Responses to notices of motion and general business. 7.1. Car park in Bedford Street.
Move an alternative recommendation of deferral of the item to the next council meeting.
Can you give us a reason before we get a seconder, councillor?
Yes, Mr Mayor. While it seems a small matter, and especially when a report concludes with doing nothing and costing nil, though doing nothing often costs more than nil, it is a ward matter because it's our second largest shopping precinct in Latrobe Ward. We are missing a Latrobe Ward councillor from the council at the moment, and I don't feel comfortable dealing with this matter.
Okay, we have a motion to defer the item. Secondly, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Lawrence has explained the reason why it's been deferred. I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? Thank you, councillors. That item has been deferred. Members of the gallery, no decision has been made on that item. Will come back in the future. We'll go now to item 8, notice of the motion, extension of Gilbert Road train route number 11. We have a mover there, Councillor Gallowa.
Yes.
Second.
Secondly, Councillor Lee.
Foreshadow an amendment.
Can we hear the amendment, Councillor?
Yes, the amendment's been circulated previously. And further resolve to refer.
Fast tracking. If there's no second to Councillor Lawrence's motion, that lapses.
Can I just ask a procedural question? Point 2 isn't point 2 redundant, given that that another party has formed government?
I think that's a very important element there.
Unless the result has changed, Mr. Point of Order. Unless the result has changed.
Mr. Mayor, point of order. While it's amusing to hear 3 people have a debate on the matter, let's have the debate.
Councillors, thank you. We've got an amendment here from Councillor Lawrence. I'm waiting for someone to second his amendment. If there's no seconder, the motion, the alternate motion lapses. I don't see a seconder. It lapses. We now have the original motion moved by Councillor Villela and seconded by Councillor Lee. Councillor Villela, you have the floor.
I do want to thank the member for Batman, Mr. Feeney, because he put this back on the map, and I was very pleased that he recognised the urgency of this particular matter. That he recognised the urgency. He recognised the urgency, and I recall the photo there with himself and our local member, Mr. Robin Scott, and they both seem to be in agreement that this particular issue is long overdue, and the more our population in Reservoir increases, the more urgent the matter is to extend the Gilbert Road tram. That extra, what is it? Maybe
1.8 kilometres.
Thank you, 1.8 kilometres, Mr. Mayor. Now it would have to be in all the transportation projects that the state government has on its plate, probably the easiest one. It will not create much chaos. It can be done in a matter of, it does boil down to money, Mr. Mayor, but it also, I think, boils down to the fact that maybe we're a safe labour seat. And maybe if we weren't a safe labour seat, this would have been done a long time ago. So I'm really glad that Mr. Feeney and Mr. Robin Scott agree on this one, but we have to remind them that it is actually a state issue. And we have a government, a state government, love the state government, who is committed to public transport. Now this to me, Mr. Mayor, sounds like an absolute no-brainer that they need to extend it. And I recall before I was on council, I think 2004, a really amazing elderly woman who spoke limited English walked the streets of Reservoir collecting signatures because she thought it was really important for elderly people to get on that tram to go to the Ironite Hospital, to get to the city for their important services. Now, that all fell on deaf ears, right? Nothing's happened. But now we have Mr Feeney, who's realised that this needs to be done. And we've got to remind Mr Scott that this is absolutely urgent, all jokes aside, Mr Mayor. It is just an absolute joke. It's an absolute affront on the community, and in any other area where maybe slightly marginal, it would have been done ages ago. So we need to write, you need to write a letter, Mr Mayor, to Robert Scott to remind him, and let's hear what his answer is, because I think this is going to be an issue out there in the community.
Thank you,
Thank
Councillor
you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, and yeah, I'm very pleased to second that motion. It's a very timely call for action because not only does the state government prioritise public transport, but we also prioritise public transport for our residents, especially in that section of Preston and also going up north to Reservoir. And it's timely because we have many developments for councillors who have taken notice of it coming along Gilbert Road. And the argument has always been put to us by the state transport officers, state planning bureaucrats, saying, well, once you build enough sufficient density of population, then we'll look at the tram route. But when you take that to the population, to the residents, they say, no, we want the infrastructure. And this is a vital missing link in the public infrastructure, public transport infrastructure connecting Reservoir and to Preston and therefore into the city. I do note of that particular lady that you speak of, Councillor Bilala, her name is Dulcie Hook, and she was very active in the public transport advocacy campaign that we mounted just before the
It's a different person.
And
there's plenty there.
there are many residents who will be benefiting from this, not least of which are pensioners and those who come from diverse backgrounds whose income may well be limited, who may wrongly rely on public transport as their only mode of transport. Right at this point in time, they're forced to catch buses, which some of them do not like because of access issues, and hopefully when we do get commitment from the state government on extension of the Route 11 or Route 12 is being split up on that tram route, will better serve the residents in the northern part of the municipality.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Any other speakers? Councillor McCarthy.
Look, I'll speak in favour of this, and I appreciate Councillor Villela taking the initiative, because I was actually quite stunned to see Mr Feeney and Mr Scott, well, not so much Mr Feeney, but certainly Mr Scott, to be in a photo on this matter. And I would like to note that it's actually the 10-year anniversary since Tina Casagrande, who at the time was in her mid-60s, presented a petition of 2,250 residents, as Councillor Villela outlined, and she did that not only on behalf of herself, but also on behalf of her friend, who in that stage was in her late 80s, and I'm not sure if she's still catching the tram, but I'll tell you what, this her friend Molly Strong moved into the area when it was called Tramways Estate, because the tram was supposed to arrive at the end of Gilbert Road. Well, the tram never arrived at the end of Gilbert Road, and I remember speaking with Molly and Tina, and the line very clearly was, I would just like to catch the tram once, just once, from where it was originally supposed to go. This issue has been going on for decades. The old Preston City Council in the last century put to the residents, the only way we'll get this tram built is if you pay for it, and of course it was a very working class suburb at the time. People couldn't afford to fork out their own pockets the cost of extending a tram. We have a state government who had the opportunity in 2006, when this petition was given to Mr Robin Scott, to take it up. It wasn't done. In 2010, another election turned around, no promise. 2014, no promise, and now we finally have some indication of support. So I'm going to take Mr Scott on his word, and I'm going to see that if you appear in a photo saying, let's bring on the tram, and you're prepared for federal money to go to it, then I think that it's a good argument for state money to go to it. We have this council, and I could remind councillors of the previous term, we actually conducted our own survey of 7,000, I think, residents, if I'm correct, Councillor Lawrence may recall, 7,000 residents, overwhelming support for this project. We have the data, we have the project, let's get on with it, Mr Scott.
Thank you very much, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Williams.
Build it and they will come. Well, Darebin has been built and it's constantly growing in population and density. I think it's important that we have the population. We have, we're only, 12, 15 kilometres if you go out further to CBD, yet we don't have the infrastructure. We need to do more in infrastructure to allow people to get around. If we're trying to build our city with less accommodation regarding cars and we want people to use transport, we need the infrastructure. So I look forward to seeing the development in this area.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Lawrence.
I'll speak in favour of the motion based on the principle it's fine to be half pregnant rather than fully pregnant. But this issue of the tramways estate, the original layout of the tram was not, as people said, Gilbert Road, it was to Pallant Avenue. So the original vision of the tram was to go all the way to the schools in Maryland's estate. And a section of that was marketed as Tramways Estate in the anticipation the tramway was coming, which was generally the area above the lake. So this issue has been around a long time. People have a very long walk to Regent Street to catch the tram. But I think we have to be honest about this issue. There's a low population density in that corner, and we have to put a proposal that will get through Yarra trams, because it's $10 million roughly per kilometre to lay it out. That's why I was very excited to hear a federal representative talk about 22 million, because that's the kind of money that will change the state government's priorities on this. Because we don't have a destination of RMIT or La Trobe Uni to drive the numbers to actually have it constructed. So let's be very clear here. We're deceiving the residents unless we say we do need this extra capital works in terms of federal funding from a public transport friendly federal government, or this council. And if this council wants a tram in a low density area, which we do, we need to actually put a contribution to get it on the table.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. If there's no further debate, I would like to just add in relation to Councillor Lawrence's comments, I think what's needed here is a very important economic impact assessment on the need, the cost and the benefits to the community for this. They've been waiting a long time, generations have been waiting, and I hate to see more generations wait for it. I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you, councillors.
We'll have that noted as unanimous, please, Mr Mayor.
Noted as unanimous. Thank you. Next item is 8.2, notice of motion, online budget tool. Move Councillor Lee. Have a seconder. Councillor Walsh. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. I seems to be harping on this online budget tool now. It's probably my third notice of motion on this particular issue. However, I go back to, I do want to be very specific on this issue. Councillors will recall in the adoption of the 16-17 budget that I felt that we didn't consult the community sufficiently prior to the adoption of the budget. And I think that was made evident by the number of submissions that we received and the amount of last-minute amendments that we have. We did resolve to pilot the online budget tool, but for various logistical reasons that didn't happen. And so I'm trying this one more time. Hopefully we'll get it through, third time lucky. The aim of the online budget tool is to use that tool not only as a consultative process, but also as an educative tool to the community to say that if we are purely looking at rates, purely looking at roads, purely looking at rubbish, what are the other economic and social impacts that council has in terms of land expenditure? If we are taking money out of the arts, for example, what is the impact on that, on various programs, on the services that we deliver to our residents? If we increase rates at a particular rate or at CPI, what's the constraints that we can deliver in terms of capital projects? What are the constraints that we have on our capital renewal projects and asset renewal gap? All of these issues needs to be discussed in an open forum and hopefully bring the residents along in that discussion with the council to understand the complexity of the council budget process. But not only that, it is also about informing residents that we as a council deliver a significant amount of services to our community, many of which other councils do not actually deliver, and we do so very proudly and efficiently. So it is a tool not only to consult with the community, but also to bring the company along with that conversation with us as councillors and as a council as a whole to understand how the budget process works so that we all feel empowered in this whole budget setting process so that our future generations will be better served through our rates and that of the service that we deliver from those rates. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Second wish to speak? Councillor Walsh.
Yeah, look, I think this is a decent initiative because it'll give residents an opportunity to to say to I guess have a better say about what services we should be delivering. We're in an environment of rate capping, and we do need to look at the services we're delivering. And in absence of a state government giving us a firm no, this is yours. This is yours. No, we'll take control of that, and which if in an environment of vote capping, the state government probably should have done. But in absence of that, it will be good to show I guess get the community's guys on what they would like to see funded.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Councillor Lawrence.
I'm just going to question, because I'm just... this relates to pre-budget submission digital online interactions, does it?
So, yeah.
Yes, at this stage I can't give that detailed answer, but it will form two parts. One is a pre-budget submission. Other part is possible communities' input into our rate capping, which will determine priorities. So I do not know which part we will take first, but if the council approves, we will go ahead.
Well, at the risk of being labelled, I'd speak in opposition to this motion. And
please do.
Look, it's a three-line motion, and in a digital age you'd think it'd be uncontroversial, but it isn't, given the community that we represent. And what concerns me about this is that we're not getting a full report, and what I'd like to see is some commitment around principles that we don't entrench a digital divide on the pre-budget consultation, and that is, where is the cold and face-to-face consultation and listening posts, so that we do not have disproportionate input onto the budget, pre the budget. We do run a fairly old-fashioned budget in many ways. We have petitions and inputs, and then we send things via motions from here to refer to budget, and it's written in paper. And a lot of our community then see the paper that's written and respond to it. Of course, a lot of our community is digitally active, so they can engage prior on the priorities. But what concerns me is, unless you put in the resources for the cold community and the non-digital community to have equal say, we are going to skewer the priorities of this council.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor...
Mr Mayor, I'm compelled to speak in favour of Councillor Lee's proposal, and I think just because as I was listening to Councillor Lawrence's points, I was thinking that we're sort of missing something in this whole debate, which is what is the purpose of the proposal? And I see the purpose of the proposal is actually, and this is all about how it's delivered. It's all about what it ends up looking like and what it can do. But if we think about how people engage with council, there are some people that rarely, if ever, enter a council building, and yet they engage with council on a weekly basis. And they do that at their neighbourhood house, because council provides funding to their neighbourhood house. They do that at their early childcare centre or at their senior citizens club. And I can see something like what Councillor Lee has put forward here as a means through which people in the sites where council is already engaged, for them to be able to engage with council. So that someone at their local neighbourhood house can walk in, and the neighbourhood house can actually in fact say, hey, would you like to actually have some input on council's budget process? Why couldn't that happen? We've got computer banks sitting there, We've got people on site who run computer classes. There's an opportunity for members in the community to have that sort of direct engagement, and we can actually take that sort of consultation out further. So I'm not so concerned about the issues that Councillor Lawrence has raised. I think there's actually enormous opportunities here through broadening participation, through actually using such a mechanism, because there are a lot of members of our community who get the council budget papers, if they do have a chance to see them, and look at them, and their starting point is, what does this mean to me? And potentially there is an opportunity here to translate what is in the council budget process into what is a more meaningful form of engagement, where people can zero in and look at how council is proposing to allocate funds,
10 seconds.
or if council hasn't proposed, what people would like to propose to council. So I wouldn't be scared of the digital world that Councillor Lawrence describes. I think that our community is already there, and for people with disabilities,
Thank you,
we
Councillor.
know that is the #1 form of engagement with council at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Villela.
I'm speaking in favour, Mr Mayor. Just a reminder.
Something new, please. We've heard a lot of repeated stuff.
But this is actually, the point of this is to ensure that it gets delivered, it's available well before the budget process starts. We've had the debate, the issues that Councillor Lawrence raised.
Yep.
We had that during the year, last year actually. So, and it was just to refresh our memories, Mr Mayor, this wasn't a case of, well, we won't do any other consultation and we'll just do it online. This was in addition to, mind you, we have to improve on the other more, the other forms of consultation, yeah. So it wasn't a case of, let's just focus on this and ignore the others, and I think Councillor Lawrence failed to note that. We've had the debate in the chamber, but I think it's very wise for Councillor Lee, because we've agreed to go down this path as an additional way of consulting with the community, but that to ensure that it's done in February, now that the systems, we've got the system, the IT system, the program, and so that we start well in advance so that we can integrate it into our own, the next council's budgetary process and deliberation. So I think it's actually very responsible of Councillor Lee to just direct council's attention to this important matter well in advance. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor White. There's no other speakers. Councillor Lee, you can close the debate or let it go to a
Just
vote.
very quickly, I
Rebuttal
know
only.
that this matter has been subject to two previous reports and one very detailed costing of, including one very detailed costing, and that detailed costing was actually unanimously passed by this council. Everyone in this chamber passed that. So unless people misread the report or forgotten about those two detailed costings, I don't see where the opposition lies.
Thank you very much. I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. Next item we're looking at is 8.3, the former Ruthven Primary School. And I understand that point 1 and 2 have been
I'll move
removed.
the motion with a deletion of point 1 and 2,
Okay, so point 1 and 2 have been deleted.
and the following numbers changed to 1, 2, 3.
So 3, 4 and 5 become 1, 2 and 3. Do I have a seconder?
Can I have a second, Mr Mayor, but I have a question.
A question first.
The question, what concerns me is point number 4. It says council noting this failure to reach agreement. Well, my understanding is that we're still in negotiation.
Mr.
So
CEO.
thank you.
I think we'll get some answers first before we progress with this item. Mr. CEO.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for raising the issue. Really, that negotiation was provided to council. The details of the negotiations or parameters were provided to council in confidence. It came through confidential report. Since then, the negotiation as per council set out as commenced, and there is no refusal or failure from either party. Negotiations two-way always, and the time taken to that negotiation is not in our hand. And I'm surprised people, obviously somebody has come up with a failure. First time I'm reading that, so I cannot answer why it's a failure, but I can say the negotiations are underway. Clearly, it's an open negotiation. Negotiation when it starts, it's not take or leave it, it's a continuous negotiation, so we are at the initial phase. And that not only it has been provided very clearly in written format to ministries, so I'm expecting their feedback anytime. So I'll leave it there. But it's, as far as I'm concerned, I cannot advise you as a failure, because
It's not a failure, and we're not in a position to actually impose deadlines on any state government or the authorities. Councillor McCarthy.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to propose some alternative words to that which Councillor Lawrence has proposed, and see if it might be acceptable and perhaps more accurate based on what I've just heard, which would simply be that the motion would read that Council commits to securing an agreement with the state government to purchase the former Ruthven Primary School site and relevant sections of Lakeside Secondary College before it enters
We actually have several of those resolutions in play.
well, before it enters the caretaker period. So that would be picking up on the point that was raised earlier during question time and indicating our intention to secure an agreement before we enter caretaker period. So that would be an alternative set of words to that which Councillor Lawrence has put forward. And if you'd be happy to take on board those words, I'd be happy to second the motion.
Well, as far as I see, this item isn't urgent because it's ongoing, and as the CEO said, you know, this is a fairly lengthy process and will take a bit of time to resolve.
Can I just ask a question, if I may?
Yes, Mr. Councillor Villallo.
I note that, just in relation to what Councillor McCarthy said in terms of seeing if we can secure this, get an outcome before we enter caretaker mode. That is something that we haven't got, to my knowledge, my recollection, anywhere in...
Can I suggest an alternative notice of motion at the next meeting then? Because this is not going to address that issue.
That's my concern.
McCarthy, what you're proposing is probably in conflict with what the intent of this one is, so that might be requiring a new notice
Because
of
I
motion.
think that issue about making sure that we can determine an outcome before we enter caretaker mode has not actually been recorded or noted anywhere.
That's a separate matter.
And I think that needs to be addressed.
Separate matter. Okay, Councillor Lawrence, we haven't got a seconder yet, I don't think, so...
I thought I had a second.
I was deliberating on that, and I'm not going to, the way it's worded,
She's withdrawn if she did. Councillor Villallo has withdrawn if she decided to. Do we have a seconder?
For the purposes of debate.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Councillor Lawrence, in relation to the motion as written.
I'll speak to the motion as written. Obviously, I appreciate not succeeding in reaching an agreement and failing to reach an agreement. There's all different shades of meaning and spin, and perhaps I could have spun this in a better way to say we have not yet succeeded in reaching agreement. But I will trust it to the common sense of residents to look past those semantics to what's the outcome. We started negotiating this with the Liberal Party for $10 million, which was extortion. We then got to last year 6.7. We've then got a confidential motion that I wasn't at and I wasn't privy to, but in fact is all around the streets of Darebin and around the government's being discussed. So the farce of having an in-camera negotiation is over. We know what the state government offered last year. We know about the value of it as open space. We know about the residential value in Reservoir. And we are having a fast-tracking process that is going to conclude in August. So talking about caretaker times is nonsense. We're 3 years late, and we've had a government for 2 years, a Labor government. We need some good faith negotiations now. And I don't see, if we are serious about concluding this, why we wouldn't be pressing to get a negotiation concluded.
Councillor Walsh, as seconder. Nothing. Debate from councillors. Councillor McCarthy first.
Look, I'm going to speak against the motion because I just don't think it makes any sense. And I think it actually potentially does more damage than any well-intentioned good in the context of what we're actually going through at the moment, which is quite a complex set of negotiations. I would say that, and I've foreshadowed a motion which I will present to the CEO as a notice of motion for the next council meeting as a way forward, but I think there is a genuine desire from the community for council to purchase this land. Council has made its intent known. It is going through a negotiation process. I can't be clear, based on what Councillor Lawrence says here, that anything here is factual, because I have not received any advice to suggest that that is the case, and I'm actually surprised that it's on the agenda. So I don't think it's passed the first test in terms of facts-based argument. We run the risk, if we move this tonight, at sending a bizarre message to the government that says that if we don't get an answer by the 26th of July, then all deals are off. This could actually mean that we lose not only Ruthven, but there's no reference here, as I can see, to the land at Lakeside, which we're also seeking to purchase as well. I'd like to think we're not forgetting about the Mary Creek corridor as well. So I just think this takes us down a dangerous path, and it's unfortunately it doesn't seem to be based on facts at all. So.
Thank you. Councillor Villala. Councillor Villala.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, look, it's a difficult one for me, Mr Mayor, because obviously we want to see this matter resolved, but we've got to do it properly. And we've got to be very mindful. Now, I know there's lots of frustration out there in the community, I really do, but it doesn't help when you've got people going off on different tangents, Mr Mayor, and we're not working together to get the best outcome. Now, the community is aware of this, and you know, we haven't reached a failure, we're in negotiations. First it was, let's put an offer on the table. We've done that. We've put a range on the table, and these things take a little bit of time. So so on the one hand, yes, we do want it done as soon as possible with that element of security, knowledge that we've achieved this outcome for the community before that we enter caretaker mode, but we've got to do it properly. And I would foreshadow that, I support Councillor McCarthy, but we also need to have a bit of a briefing to look at strategies and what tactics, etc., that we need to employ in order to get the best outcome for them. Because I am concerned, and I agree with Councillor McCarthy that they might say, well, stuff you. We're not going to give you a response by the 26th of July. You can't bully us about, and then we've lost it.
Thank you.
It's too much of a risk, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Councillors have finished. Councillor Lee.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I too would like to speak against it, and I urge Councillor Lawrence, if it's not too late, to withdraw that particular motion, because it contains a number of factual errors, as the other councillors have said. Now, yes, the negotiation process and the price that we're going to put forward is subject to a confidential motion, and that was agreed upon. And in fact, Councillor Lawrence has a copy of those confidential minutes, and so he knows well in advance the process and the price that they have in mind. So the fact that Councillor Lawrence didn't attend the meeting did not preclude him from decision making.
Stick to the item, please.
On a second point, when you enter negotiation in good faith, you do not enter negotiation and say, by the way, if you don't make a decision by this point, all bets are off. That is not enter negotiation in good faith. And thirdly, the final offer, we don't have a final offer, because our resolution is very clear on that. We must not undermine the delegated authority from this council to our CEO to enable him to carry out his duties to negotiate on council's behalf. So I do find this motion undermining the authority delegated to the CEO as authorised by this council.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. No further speakers. Councillor Lawrence, you want to close the debate?
Yes.
A rebuttal.
I'll go to that.
No new items, please.
No new items. I think, in fact, the negotiations around this land are no different to others we discussed tonight, and I don't know why the ranges aren't published and we don't have a discussion about that. Because then we'll know who's blocking an outcome. But at the moment, we've made the mistake and the poor governance decision to go in camera, and I haven't read the document, Councillor Lee. I know you're right, but you don't know what I read.
A rebuttal, please.
Well, that was a false statement from the councillor regarding me.
I do not accept that, Mr Mayor. That
Councillor Lee, it was provided. It's up to the council whether he reads or not. Now your time's running out. Stick to the item.
We're now facing a fast-tracking process which has an objective to put a 4-storey plus high-growth zone on it. That process is being concluded and will be examined by the Minister.
Lawrence, that's an irrelevant matter.
It is as relevant as a caretaker, because these negotiations need to speed up in weeks, not months. And if they don't, you won't get the land, the valuation will blow it out.
Thank you, councillor. That closes the debate. I'll put that item to a vote. All those in favour, raise your hand.
So, I'll stand.
You don't have to stand, just raise your hand.
Yes.
Those against? That motion is lost, councillor.
I'll call for a division.
You can stand now. I name councillor Lawrence. Please
I was
stand.
ready to do that.
Thank you, councillor Lawrence. Those against, please stand. I name councillor Lee, McCarthy, Williams, Cetus, Fontana, Villela. Thank you. Next item we're looking at is 8.4, the Clean Governance Action, removing the 1% from our planning committee to protect the 99% of residents. Moved by councillor Lawrence. Do we have a seconder for this? If there's no seconder, it lapses.
I'm happy to hear the debate.
Good on you, councillor Walsh. You have a seconder, councillor Lawrence, so let's hear councillor Lawrence present the argument.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, is Councillor Lawrence, Councillor Walsh aware of which item we're moving?
Yes.
8.4.
Yes.
I'm
I would hope so. Okay, councillor Lawrence has the floor. Your time starts now.
There's a revised there's an amended motion that takes in concerns raised by councillor, a number of councillors.
It's on the screen. It was circulated. You may speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is an issue that's going across Australia at the moment. In fact, in New South Wales, the Greens are taking the position that perhaps the 1% should be excluded from being elected to council altogether. I'm taking a more moderate proposal, which is where multimillionaires are sitting on matters that affect them in that 1% of the population who actually own 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 residential properties, that they should actually be excluded from both the planning committee and also these strategic land decisions that affect the values of the land. Now, we do have a loose framework in Victoria about conflicts of interest, but it's interesting how flexible it is in application. This would actually remove any inference that people with large land portfolios were actually making decisions about development next door to you. I think it's fairly simple, and we could put it on as a trial and see how it works. Now, as for the impact on the council, whether it has a quorum or not, I suppose that will depend on whether a large number of councillors here are in the top 0.5% of Australians who own such amounts of land.
Councillor Walsh.
I'm going to use, you do something quite well, and use the seconding to speak against.
No. If you've got nothing to no, if
you may vote against, but you can't speak against.
You can vote against it. You can vote against it only. You've got to speak for it. You've actually moved it. You seconded it.
Or
no. You can second for the.
Well, you can reserve your right to speak because you're actually supporting it. Did you want to hear a debate or not?
I want to hear the debate, but I do want to.
Oh, well, you can speak against it afterwards then. Okay. You reserve your right.
Can I ask a question to you, Mr. Mayor? Look, obviously there are a number of practical questions about how this could actually function and work, given the amount of properties in large property portfolios that are tucked away in trust funds or in spouses' names, as we saw during the federal election campaign, or joint names. I would just wonder whether this would catch a couple, and I have raised this with Councillor Lawrence when he first raised this matter, whether this proposal, in our office's view, would capture a situation. For instance, there is a couple, 2 women that I'm aware of, who have a self-managed superannuation fund, 4 apartments in the one building. They co-own them, that is their whole superannuation.
That's a good example, Councillor.
And they don't own property across the city, they own it in one apartment block. They've invested all of their earnings from being teachers in that one building, and they want to keep the rents down. I'm just wondering if would that apply to this situation?
If they became councillors, it could.
If they became, it could be a thing that would prevent them from standing for council,
Possibly.
I think. So I'm just wondering, through our officers, would that apply in their technical knowledge to this situation?
If it's approved, it might.
I'll take it, that answer requires research. It's difficult. The report that will come to the council will explain what part also can be captured, and some of the privacy issues and other matters will prohibit us seeking certain information, but however we have to come back to you as a report.
Thank you. And just a second question, and it probably goes to the matter of what I would consider is probably a greater concern in this debate, which is actually the role of developers and developer donations, which I think is a matter that Councillor Lawrence referred to New South Wales, where it's a much bigger issue there, where a councillor has either received or sought donations from a property developer, that doesn't seem to get picked up at all in Councillor Lawrence's proposal, and I just withdraw...
You're arguing now against, I think.
So I'll just wonder whether Councillor Lawrence, why he hasn't included that as a component.
So it can be found, identified in the report. Speakers, for or against?
Have we got the seconder? Is the seconder a seconder?
He's a second.
I was wondering whether the seconder is
He's right. Councillor Lawrence.
Mr Mayor, I'm speaking against this. I don't know how it got through and accepted as a notice of motion. Councillor Lawrence has been a councillor for many years, and we're often reminded of that, and on the planning committee for a while, and I'm just wondering why it's come up now, this particular, concern that he has, that apparently it's Australia-wide concern.
To the item.
Yeah, I am speaking to the item,
please.
Mr Mayor. I'm speaking to the item because I wonder why this particular issue is coming up now, three months before the council election, and why do we need a report when I'm sure that Councillor Lawrence knows exactly which councillors he's talking about?
No, Councillor Vella, to the item, please, or I'll stop you there.
I think it's fraught. I think it's fraught, as Councillor McCarthy and Councillor Lee Councillor McCarthy has identified. I think if you are a person of, let's say, 60 years of age, don't have any children, and invested in property 20, 30 years ago as a way of investing for your future, doesn't necessarily put you in the same bracket as maybe some multi-million, billion-dollar developer. So I think we've got to be really careful, Mr Mayor, that when you talk about someone who's got maybe 3 invested properties, what are we saying about that person? Is that person not able to make a sound judgment for what's in the best interest of the community? There seems to be some prejudged notions here. And I think if we're going to go down this path, as Councillor McCarthy noted, it's a complex and wide web that we're looking into, and it's just very narrow, the what Councillor Lawrence has identified, and I just question the intention.
Any other speakers? Councillor Lee.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I feel opposed to this, so I'm going to speak against it as well, because our current Local Government Act has very strong provisions about conflict of interest. I think that is made very clear at the beginning of every planning meeting, at the beginning of every council meeting, as you did, Mr Mayor, just now. We are required to declare conflict of interest, and where councillors do not declare conflict of interest, they will be found in breach of the Local Government Act, and there are appropriate sanctions. Similarly, there are also issues where councillors over-declare. In other words, just because you're a councillor doesn't mean you have to declare interest in everything that you have. There are certain provisions, there are certain responsibilities as councillor, you've got to act in the community interest. The issue I also found with this is that if we are adopting this, we are essentially overstepping the requirements of the Local Government Act. And should this be adopted, perhaps we can look at other ways to overstep the Local Government Act. Perhaps we should limit our councillor terms to 2 consecutive terms full stop, instead of sitting here for 10 years. But that's not the matter. The issue here is why 3. If I own a property in my name, or I have a joint account with my wife or my partner, if my parents, should they live here and one of them pass away and pass their property into my name, does that make me a wealthy property investor, or is it just through chance and circumstance that I happen to have 3 properties? If and when that situation does occur, the onus is on myself and other councillors who have an interest in the area to declare that conflict, even when that time arises. And I see no reason to override and going above and beyond the requirements of the Local Government Act, because the Act is very clear with appropriate sanctions and penalties on what constitutes conflict of interest.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor McCarthy.
Mr Mayor, I haven't spoken against this, and I'm surprised that we're even debating it. there was a seconder who wasn't even willing to speak in favour of it. So I don't want to waste councillors' time, but I don't want to see council's time wasted again.
Thank you.
And I just would like to ask councillors to seriously think about the notices of motion that they put forward, because from my perspective, this is actually clouding what is the real issue.
Stick to the item. That's a separate matter, Councillor.
The real issue here, Mr Mayor, and Councillor Lawrence, the second part of the first point, which refers to the planning committee and making decisions about planning applications and strategic rezoning decisions, frames essentially one of the major pieces for this council. We need to be really aware of what we bring to the table. I would ask the councillors and including Councillor Lawrence to reflect on our role, and if a better notice of motion is required to be worded, then by all means bring it, Councillor Lawrence or anyone else, that actually says if you seek donations from developers, even if you're not successful, then you might want to think about that as a conflict. That's not breaching the Local Government Act, it's just a point of transparency. By proposing to exclude people on the basis of chance and circumstance, as Councillor Lee has outlined, you may very well find yourself in breach of the Human Rights Charter. I mean, I don't know how far this goes. So
we see the point.
Let's get serious about our work in the chamber. We're actually wasting officers' time right now. We're wasting the community's time, but even considering spurious motions. But let's use this time to say no more of this nonsense.
Here.
Okay.
Can I speak?
Oliver, let's bring it to a
You may, Oliver Walsh, Councillor.
I'm going to speak. I'm going to speak against this. I've never supported this notice of motion.
Well, you recorded a second, so that's going to look in the books.
We don't need it. This is bad. This is the politics of
Stick to the
politics of envy. Politics of envy.
Yes.
Politics of envy. There's nothing wrong with owning owning your home, and then if you are fortunate enough to own another one, why should you be painted as this demon, as this ogre? You shouldn't be. It also turns its back on the great Australian dream of owning your own home. And
thank you, Councillor Walsh. I'm going to close that item.
Whatever there is now.
Councillor, you can rebut. But I will make a comment before you do close. I honestly see this as an item which discriminates against property owners, and this council should not discriminate against anyone. You may close the debate now, Councillor Lawrence.
The figure of 3 or more properties derived from analysis of ABS statistics, which show that less than 0.5...
That's a new item, Councillor Lawrence. Stick to rebutting the arguments which council have argued.
They've questioned my intent and my character and asked for the reasons of the motion, and I'm laying them out. That is a direct rebuttal, Mr Mayor.
Let's hear it.
And so we have a 0.5% of Australians who now own strings of properties, and we know the debates around negative gearing, we know the debates around overseas capital that are leading us to haves and have-nots. Now, if someone was deciding on my superannuation balance and they had $5 million in tree investments, I wouldn't like that funds manager looking at my super. And if someone's got millions and millions of dollars of property and they're doing it in a small area of 55,000 houses and making decisions, I don't buy it that it's not declared. I don't buy that it's not a conflict of duties and a conflict of roles. In the Local Government Act, we have to declare $10,000 worth of shares. That's chicken feed to putting a 4-storey zoning on your investment property where you increase the fold for 300 or 400%. Now, the criteria also comes down to what is in the register.
Mr Mayor, these are additional points.
Close rebuttal.
I've also been asked why 3 properties based on the register, because that's the only known quantity we know. We don't know about the overseas investments of people. We don't know about those other things.
10 seconds.
The Local Government Act requires us to state the properties in the city and adjoining municipalities, and that's the only measure we can use.
That's closed. I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Those against, that item is lost.
Core division.
Councillor Walsh has called for a division. All those in favour, please stand. I name Councillor Lawrence. Those against, please stand. I name Councillor Lower, Walsh, Fontana, Cetus, Williams, McCarthy and Lee. Thank you. That concludes our notice of motion. We now go to urgent business. Do we have an urgent business tonight, Mr CEO? None. General business. Any general business? Any petitions from councillors this evening? No petitions. We now go to reports of standing committees, which include the Audit Committee, 12.1. Have someone move that, please?
Happy to move.
Move, Councillor Walsh. Have a second, Councillor Lee. There's no debate or discussion. I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? All those in favour? Carried. Next item is 13, records of assemblies of councillors. Those who have lodged their reports have been... I beg your pardon. Records of assemblies of councillors. 13.1, moved Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Lee. All those in favour? That's carried. Reports by mayors and councillors, that's been circulated. Those who have lodged, can I encourage councillors to please lodge your reports?
I haven't done it.
As I understand it, it might attract some attraction from people. Moved Councillor Villela, was it? And second Councillor Williams. All those in favour? Carried. Confidential reports, Mr CEO? None. Close of meeting. Thank you, members of the gallery. That concludes tonight's meeting. We can see you back on August the 1st for our next one. Thank you.